Hey, Tommy from the Run Testers. In this video, we are going to be doing an early look at the Puma Fast RB running shoe. Let's see what this thing's like. The Puma Fast RB Nitro Elite costs around $400. We don't have the finalised prices yet. It weighs 347 grams or 12 ounces for men in a size 8, and the drop is technically 12 millimeters. The Fast RB Nitro Elite is the brand's most creative shoe to date. It features 3 power plates, 1 carbon and 2 TPU that work alongside a thick 58mm stack of NITROFOAM Elite midsole layers. The head-turning construction is designed to produce a spring-like effect that promotes a high level of bounce and propulsion. Featuring a decoupled midsole design, the shoe is 18mm higher than the regulation stack height for professional athletes and aims to offer all runners a fun experience for a variety of runs. The upper is a laceless mesh material that's reinforced with Puma power tape to ensure a lockdown fit, while the outsole uses Puma grip for a high level of grip and durability. Only 1,000 pairs of the Puma Fast RB Nitro Elite will be available to buy worldwide when it goes on sale.
When it comes to the fit of the Puma Fast RB, I've got a UK 9 here, which is a US 10. That's the normal size I have across the Puma range, and it usually fits me very well. This shoe does fit me very well. I think it's a slightly more dialed in fit than the Puma DV8 Nitro Elite 3, which I did find that I would have been better off going a half a size down. But this has been okay in my normal size. This one-piece upper actually fits me quite securely, and I haven't really had any concerns about it in terms of my foot moving around in there. So always a bit of a risk with a one-piece upper like this, especially with such a huge stack of wobbly stuff underfoot. But all round, the fit was pretty good for me. I was happy in my normal size.
So I'd say the fit of the Puma Fast RB has been good in general. I think there's a couple of areas I think if I was going deeper into that testing, I'd be a little bit kind of wary and concerned about, but ultimately in general it's been okay. I've had mine in a UK size 8. That's my typical running shoe size. That's typically the shoe size that works best for me in Puma shoes. You know, it's the same size I had for the Puma DV8 Nitro Elite 3, which maybe ran a little bit long for me, but ultimately didn't cause any issues for me. Now, I think the RB, I think the toe box is very good. I think, you know, it's a good amount of room here, not overly generous, and, you know, didn't feel long for me. So I think from that point of view, it does feel like it fits pretty true to size for me. And you get into this kind of all-in-one upper, which, you know, is really doing the work of keeping your feet locked in. You know, these things here, these are not going to lock you in anymore, dial things in. These are about helping you slip this shoe on ultimately. I think in the middle of the shoe, centrally, it works pretty well. I think on the top of my feet, where, you know, you'd expect to find some lacing, I would probably prefer some lacing there, but ultimately this is about trying to keep it very streamlined. And then you get this kind of very thin heel collar where there is some kind of padding inside. There's not a huge amount there, and I think it's mainly on the sides of your foot. There's not a huge amount at the back, where I found there has been a little bit of rub, a little bit of irritation in my Achilles. So, you know, some areas which I think, you know, as I said, going deeper into testing, I'd be a little bit concerned about. But in general, I think going true to size here has worked for me. It has been a relatively good one to kind of slip on and yeah, get out running in it. So yeah, I would say go true to size based on my testing.
So the fit for me in the shoe, I'm a size 8 in the UK. This is a size 8. I wasn't sure this shoe was going to fit because it doesn't have any lacing system on it. It doesn't have any way to tighten the shoe or anything like that. It's just got this very aerodynamic sock-like upper. I actually find it to be very comfortable in my UK size 8. It fits me comfortably. There's a lot of space in the forefoot, so it's not too narrow. It's not the most structured upper. I didn't feel like I was fully locked in, but I've done interval sessions in this shoe absolutely fine. At no point did I think it felt loose or anything like that. I mean, if it did have any sort of strapping in it, I probably would strap it down a little bit more, but it was very comfortable. I'd stay to my size in this shoe, and surprisingly good considering the way that you can't actually make any impact on the upper design. So yeah, stay to my size in this shoe.
So what is it like to run in the rule breaker? Well, I would say it has been an interesting time so far. I remember seeing a picture of this shoe. I think Puma showed me a picture back when I was doing the Manchester half. And I think my reaction was, if I ever get that shoe in, how on earth am I going to be able to run in it? I now have that shoe in, and I have to say I was actually pleasantly surprised in terms of getting on with this shoe. I think first and foremost, it's a pretty easy shoe to slip on. You know, obviously no lacing, you kind of use these kind of little tags here to kind of pull you in, and you know, you're in and can get going. Now I am a heel striker. This is not really a shoe that you would say is designed for heel strikers. So ultimately I was a little bit concerned about that, but actually getting going in this shoe wasn't too bad, and it didn't take me long to kind of adjust running in this shoe. Now, I have run in other Puma carbon racing shoes. I really like the DV8 Nitro Elite, which is a totally different prospect to this shoe. I think, you know, I think it's similar to things like the Puma Fast R series, which I haven't personally run in, but I think in terms of being a shoe design that kind of pushes the boundaries of what a carbon racing shoe should be, it's more kind of fitting in that category. It does remind me of another shoe that Puma launched, the Fast RB, which I think was more of a kind of lifestyle shoe, similar silhouette, had a bit more of a fashion focused launch, and you know, really feels like it's bringing that design in and kind of putting it into a kind of running shoe kind of design, and seeing how it kind of ultimately, whether that kind of works here on a Puma Fast RB. And as I said, actually getting out in the shoe wasn't as awkward. You know, once I forgot, I kind of got past the fact that this heel is kind of so, you know, so far raised from the floor. Actually, it rolled through pretty nicely. I think when you get into that, onto that forefoot, you get that bounce, you get that kind of slightly compressed feel, you get that snap and response there, what you want from a kind of faster shoe. Ultimately, my first run was a kind of 5k run. I kind of went out, tried to do near around my kind of 5k pace. Felt pretty good to do that in. I didn't feel like I was kind of restricted, or you know, I was being held back in terms of running those paces. But ultimately, I think, you know, the thing for me is when I've kind of run a little bit longer in this shoe, it's not the lightest shoe, not the lightest kind of carbon race shoe, particularly against something like the Puma DV8 Nitro Elite 3, which has really kind of pushed Puma closer to those top tier racing shoes in terms of overall weight. This isn't a light shoe, and ultimately I think, you know, coupled with the kind of little kind of question marks I have about the upper, particularly around the Achilles and around the heel collar, I found it, I had to stop a couple of times and kind of readjust, kind of get going again. But in terms of the actual ride, it didn't feel like there was a kind of very kind of long learning curve to get going in the shoe. When you do, it does feel relatively kind of, you know, enjoyable to do. It just feels that, you know, as I said, for someone that kind of really relies on having that extra kind of foam at the back of this shoe, you know, I felt like I did ultimately miss that in my experience. And then when you look at that kind of outsole, there is more rubber here on the back of the shoe, ultimately, where you are going to drop down probably a little bit more, less so on the forefoot. You know, it's not your typical kind of Puma grip outsole thing across the entirety of the outsole. I did find, you know, I was running mainly on pavements and roads. I did kind of come across some kind of routes where there were a little bit, there were some kind of stones and pebbles, and I did find I slipped a little bit on the front of this shoe. So I would say the outsole probably isn't quite, you know, that kind of Puma quality that we are kind of, you know, used to and associate with its kind of, you know, its most recent shoes. So yeah, there's definitely some qualities that I can see that I did like about the RB. I think ultimately, it wasn't as awkward to running as I thought it would be, given my kind of style of running. I also found it pretty, you know, stable for a shoe that looks this awkward as well too. Not the most stable racing shoe, but I do think that, you know, compared to some other shoes, I think generally the stability of it for an awkward shoe like this has been pretty good for me. I think, yeah, it's been an interesting time. That would be the best way to describe it. Would I want to dig deeper into my running and go longer in this shoe? I'll discuss that in my initial verdict.
So, Puma Fast RB, a very interesting shoe to land at our door last week. I wasn't really sure exactly what this shoe is for, because obviously it has all these plates in, it's got this stuff about breaking the rules and breaking records on the side, and yet, you know, I picked up the shoebox and could just feel how heavy this shoe was. Put it on the scale, 370 grams in a UK 9 for a shoe is, you know, almost twice the weight of top racing shoes, so it leaves you a bit of a conundrum. What exactly am I going to use this shoe for? Like, all those plates and stuff suggest a speedy running shoe, but with all that weight and cushioning, maybe it's more one to cruise around in. And yeah, so I took it out for 60 minutes easy with some pickups for my first run, and I suppose the first thing to say is it was very fun to run in this shoe. Like, it is very bouncy, it's got a lot of explosive bounce underfoot, kind of at any pace, as you'd expect. Like, the heel doesn't do a whole lot, it either stabilizes you or just tips you onto this forefoot forefoot section, and then all this stuff comes into play and just springs you along. And even at my relaxed paces, it felt very bouncy, and definitely I was running at a faster pace than my effort or heart rate would suggest in the shoe, which is kind of the classic carbon plate shoe where you're just putting less effort in to get loads more pace and bounce out. But then if I did actually try and pick up the pace more deliberately and run at slightly faster speeds, it certainly feels quite laboured, because this is such a heavy shoe, especially someone for myself, like it's a high cadence, quite shuffly runner, not necessarily a big loping bounder, and this shoe is just so heavy on the foot that it's not really one that I'd feel like a very racy shoe as a result. I went on a very flat, straight route for my runner shoe, because I was a bit worried about how sketchy it's going to be with all this stuff going on, the big cutouts, the kind of decoupled midsole and all that, and it doesn't actually feel as crazy underfoot as you might expect on that front. Like, it's certainly not a stable shoe, but I didn't really have any worries about it once I got used to running in it and started to understand the feel of it and all the bounce under the forefoot and all that. So yeah, it's not one that you necessarily have to be very, very careful in, but certainly you have to be more careful in the shoe than other shoes. It's certainly not stable or anything like that. And like I say, that heel section really just tips you forward onto this front section, and you get that bounce. Like, it does run a lot lighter than it is, obviously. Like, it doesn't feel like a real slouch when you're running at speed. It just feels a lot bigger and heavier than top class racing shoes. Like, we tested the Puma DV8 Nitro Elite 3 recently, and that feels a lot more explosive and fast just because the pickup is so much lighter. And even though you can hit this front section hard and get a load of bounce out of it, maybe bigger runners will unlock even more bounce from this shoe and maybe find it really fast. But I think more that actually overall, I think this isn't really a shoe with a very defined purpose. Like, I know it's got this stuff about breaking records, but it's almost just Puma's had a bit of fun here, see what they can create, a really bouncy shoe. If you want to buy it and use it for whatever you want to, basically. What would it fit for you? Maybe for some people it could be a racing shoe, but I think for most it's more just an interesting and fun shoe to run around at easy paces. Before we all get into the price and everything like that, we'll also talk about that in the verdict. But yeah, it was a pretty fun, easy outing in this shoe. Not one that I think really fits very well for my running style or really what I'm looking for in a running shoe, but yeah, it was certainly interesting.
So this is clearly a shoe that is very interesting. I actually went out to Boston to see the guys at Puma when they were developing this shoe, and I saw an early version, and it was very similar to this. When I saw it, I was thinking this is a concept shoe which is never going to be bought by anybody in this iteration. I thought it would be modified and developed to become more of a traditional carbon plate racer or something like that. This is pretty much what I saw when the guys were looking and developing it, and they were very excited and enjoying the developing of this. So I think it's a real testament to the fact that Puma are trying stuff, and not just trying stuff, but trying stuff that people can actually use and buy and test out. It's a shoe that It's a bit of a funny one because it is a very heavy shoe. So, and you can really tell that when you're out running in it. There's a lot of stuff going on with this shoe, and some really interesting stuff. I mean, you've got 3 plates in here. You've got different densities of foam in here as well. And it does feel very fun to run in. So I've done a couple of easy runs in this and a couple of interval sessions in this shoe. The easy runs, it does feel very fun to run in. It feels very bouncy. It definitely feels like a shoe that is doing something that is enjoyable when you're out on the run. And you definitely feel that massive stack height in it. It really feels like you've got a lot of shoe on your foot, and it's really soft and bouncy. But when I did the interval sessions in it, you really notice that it's a heavy shoe. So I've done a couple of interval sessions in this so far, and they were quite tough interval sessions. So I think one was like 7 times 2 minutes at 10k pace with some half marathon 4-minute reps in there as well. And running at a faster pace in the shoe, the bounce doesn't outweigh the weight. So you definitely feel like it's a heavy shoe, and I did struggle to maintain a faster pace in this shoe. So it's definitely not a shoe designed for speed. When it comes to speed, I want a lighter shoe. I don't necessarily want loads of bounce. If I'm doing a short rep, I want something that's light and nimble and just means I can pick up the pace really quickly. This doesn't allow you to do that. So I think if this is a shoe that is designed for performance, it's designed for longer distance performance. So it might be that it's better over marathon distance for a consistent pace, but I still think over marathon distance that weight is going to really affect you because you're going to notice it a lot as your legs get tired in the later stages. So it's definitely a shoe that I think what we're going to see is a development of the shoe in time. It's definitely got some technology in it which might work really well. I think it needs to be tweaked. I think it needs to be played with more. I think the foam in there is probably not quite right. It needs to be a bit lighter and it needs to be a bit bouncier. So there are nice elements to the shoe, and it's nice that Puma's trying these things out. It's definitely going to make headlines as an interesting shoe. I actually wore this for a park run a couple of weeks ago, and quite a lot of people were staring at me thinking, what am I wearing? But yeah, overall on those runs, I found that it was comfortable, bouncy. It's surprisingly stable for this. When I first looked at this shoe, I was thinking, I'm training for a marathon now. I've recently come off injury. Do I really want to try this shoe? It looks like it's going to feel very strange on the foot when you're running in it. It doesn't really. It just feels like a high stack shoe. It feels relatively stable for something that's got these decoupled midsole design, and no issues in running it on easy runs. Definitely, and even on the faster runs, it felt like a max cushion shoe really. So yeah, definitely no issues with it there. So overall, I have very much enjoyed testing this shoe. I don't think it's a shoe that's really designed for mass appeal. I think it's a shoe designed for fun, for people that are collectors and all those sorts of things. So interesting shoe, but I think we'll see it develop quite a bit before it really becomes mainstream.
A verdict on the Puma Fast RB. It's a tricky one to give a verdict on because obviously it's ridiculously expensive. There's very few made. It's not really a shoe that's intended to go out there and start really filling the rotations of runners across the land. It's more just an interesting idea, a fun shoe, a collector's item if anything, and one that you can pick up if you're really into this area of running shoes, and something that's quite novel and bringing new ideas to the table. Puma's been doing this for a while with their carbon shoes. They tend to go out on a limb and produce things that are really interesting and have new ideas, and they're trying to innovate in an area where innovation is slowing down a bit, I think, in the carbon market because of the restrictions placed by World Athletics. And more, what I'd be interested in this shoe about is what kind of technology and ideas from this shoe will trickle down into legal racing shoes. So Puma has got two very good ones now in the Deviate Nitro Elite 3 and the Puma Fast R2. Those are the racing shoes really. They're faster than this shoe for sure. This is more of a concept, a nice interesting idea. You're not going to go and spend hundreds on this to fill out a rotation. You're spending the money on this because it's an interesting shoe, quite a fun one, and maybe you like collecting shoes. Like if you're looking for a serious racer, go look at Puma's legal racers or other shoes like the Asics Metaspeed, that kind of thing. If you're looking for do-it-all shoes that actually are more fit for the daily grind of miles, there are plated shoes out there that do a lot more than this and a bit more normal and much cheaper, like the Hoka Mach X2. Puma continues to do fun things. This is a fun shoe, just not necessarily a very practical one or one that really has a defined purpose. It's more one that you do what you want with, I'd say, if you are going to buy it. But if you're watching this video as someone who's looking to build a practical and strong shoe rotation for an event or for just your general running, this is not the shoe to put in it.
So my verdict on the Puma Fast RB, as I said in the earlier section of the video, I think this is a shoe that's really designed to test some out. It's a shoe that Puma has had fun making. It is a concept that is definitely fun to look at, it's fun to run in, and we'll probably see developments of this over time. It's a very heavy shoe. It's not a shoe that you're going to use for most performance training. I'm relatively light, so I might not be getting the full bounce effect of this shoe. So if you're a heavy runner, it might do a bit more. It might be a really good marathon shoe for you, I don't know, but I definitely wouldn't use this for any races. Me and Mike might do it for a bit of fun at some point, but when I've been doing those intervals, I struggled to run faster in this shoe, and that was reps at my 10k pace. So if I was doing a 10k in this shoe, I think I'm really going to struggle because it does feel very, very heavy. Easy runs, it feels great, but you're not going to spend this much money on an easy run shoe because it's a lot of money. The chances are you're going to buy this shoe as a collector or something where there aren't that many of these made, not many people will have them, so it's probably an interesting shoe to own. As we see future developments of the shoe, maybe will look a little bit more like what you'd expect from a modern day carbon plate racer, but this would be one of those rare occasions where it's almost like you get to own the prototype of the shoe that is developed over time, and it is a really nice looking shoe and a fun looking shoe to have. So I think it's a shoe that's designed to try some things out. It's a shoe that's designed to make some headlines, and it's a shoe that's designed to be fun, and it does all of those. I assume it's going to do all those things very, very well, and it'd be really interesting to see how this develops over time. But not many people are going to be able to try it because there's not many versions out anyway. So hopefully we'll get to see a more accessible version come out at a cheaper price and possibly lighter as well.
So after 3 runs in the Puma Fast RB, is this a shoe I think that you should be buying for your next race? I think, well, first and foremost, it's really expensive. It's going to be unlimited release. I think it's going to be very difficult to get hold of. I think ultimately, if you miss out on getting this shoe, I don't think that's going to be a big thing, because I think ultimately this is very much, I think, a concept shoe for me, and really showcasing the things that Puma are working on, the things that Puma are already putting into its shoes, and really trying to, I think, ultimately show or have a little bit of a play in terms of that kind of design, because ultimately they do have a very good carbon racing shoe. They have a couple of good ones there now, and I think ultimately this is really trying to see what else I could possibly do with the shoe. But I think there are some qualities that I like. I do think this all-in-one upper, I think there is something in that. We've kind of seen that from other brands looking at a way to kind of reduce that weight and still get that really good fit from a racing shoe or a faster shoe. I think there's elements here. I think that's definitely something Puma will probably look at and try and evolve into another shoe. I think when you look at what you are getting in the forefoot of this shoe, I think there is something in there in terms of that combination, in terms of that makeup there, and what that kind of delivers in terms of that experience. So I think there's some elements there. And so we're already seeing in Puma shoes that are really showing that it is getting where it needs to be, I think, and catching up with the other kind of brands that are delivering really standout racing shoes. Obviously, it's a heavy shoe as well too, compared to other kind of carbon racing shoes, compared to other Puma shoes as well too. So yeah, I think ultimately for me, I come away from this shoe thinking, this isn't a shoe that I'm thinking, it's a concept shoe, but probably I'm going to use it for a lot of my runs. I think, I'd be a bit hesitant to run a little bit longer in this shoe just because I think it has been a little bit uncomfortable for me in places, but I can appreciate there are some qualities that I have liked here. But I think, ultimately, I think this is really about saying, we are trying to do things differently with our racing shoes. We're willing to go out and do something a little bit different. And, we're not going to rest on our laurels and go do whatever everyone else is doing. And we will, if we can try and do something different, we will. And I think that's a good thing here. And that's really what the Puma Fast RB is about. But in terms, based on those first few runs, is it a shoe that I think, this is absolutely the Puma shoe that I'd be racing in? I would probably still be going for the DV8 Nitro Elite 3, which I think is a fantastic shoe, a light shoe, just a more comfortable shoe in general to slip on and go out and run and race in. And I think it ultimately shows that Puma is on the right tracks, but it's also, with a shoe like this, it's showing that, look, we want to try and experiment and do some different things. This might not be the shoe that, or maybe how that shoe looks, but ultimately there's going to be some elements here that I think they're definitely going to take and will evolve into other shoes.
That's from us on this look at the Puma Fast RB. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click the little bell. And if you're going to catch and play, you can enter our podcast, which comes out a couple of times each month. Thanks a lot for watching. Catch you next time.